The Real Ship Show. I'm Katy Temple.
I'm Anna Crowe.
We're excited to be recording in Los Angeles, California. We've got some LA guests for you. The Real Ship Show is about creators, entrepreneurs, change makers who have made small and big shifts in order to get closer to their authentic selves and accomplish things that they never thought that they could.
Absolutely. And our guest today is no stranger to the boardroom. She has, and let me get this right, a doctorate in clinical health psychology. She speaks to a lot of different organizations about mindset, all the things we're going to talk about today. She is also a founder of All Things Are Looking Up, and she just had an incredible book release, which we're going to really dive into as well. So, Dr. Deepika Chopra, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to just dive right in because
Let's go.
Katy and I are both fans of optimism.
Right.
And our question for you is, when did you decide that it was time to write this book? What made you go, you know what, I think it's time for a book on optimism?
You know, in quite honesty, and I'm sure a lot of authors would tell you, especially in this space, this book has been something that I have probably been working on for 5 years. So a long time. And the idea of it, or just sort of wanting to put it out there in the world and gathering the information and what I was doing, came long before that. But something inside of me just it wasn't the right time. I needed more to say. I wanted sort of to feel like it was the right moment. And I think what really shifted for me, it was after COVID. I was really serious about writing stuff, when I first started studying optimism long time ago. I think studying optimism was a little too woo-woo for the science community, and it was way too science and evidence-based forward for like the self-growth community at the time. So I sort of found myself in this weird place where I didn't really belong. And it was what I was most curious about. I love the neuroscience behind it. And I really found that when I was in grad school, and I sort of utilized any opportunity I could get, whether it was clinically or research, whatever I had to do to really like dive into this particular topic and niche. I did my dissertation on optimism many, many years ago now. So my professional self was doing that. But I think what really stuck for me and why I kept at it is that personally and from a curiosity standpoint, it's like everything I was thinking about. I kept coming up to this like idea and thought and truth that in neuroscience, the brain is an anticipatory organ. So it is constantly thinking and acting in future tense. And it was baffling to me why so much at that time that I was being taught in terms of, modalities to use with patients and clients was really based more in the past. And we were at that time just getting to the point where we were doing a lot of interventions on present tense, so cognitive behavioral therapy work, which is what my focus was when I was doing more clinical work. And I just started to think about, like, why aren't people talking about sort of these ideas of what they're thinking about their future? And I mean this with, sure, 5 years from now, but I really mean it from like a minute from now, 10 minutes from now. That's how the brain works. And so we know, and now we know, the way in which we feel and the way we behave is directly sort of impacted by what we project or what we think is going to happen in a certain scenario. So to me, that's like the secret. That's the key. What are you expecting? You could want something until the cows come home, but unless your expectation of it and you think it's probable that it's going to happen, your executive functioning of the brain is not going to start firing with solutions and ways to really, chip away at the goal. And so that gap is too big. So for me, I became obsessed with helping people close that gap.
So, voila. And do you find in all of your work that you've done with others and in thinking through this book and this concept and the work you've done with your dissertation, that do humans generally lean more negative than positive?
That is such an amazing and good question because it's really nuanced. You're welcome. It was a great question. But how you worded it was great because I think most people just sort of ask, aren't we born one way or another? And I think it's really nuanced. So from an evolutionary standpoint, we as humans were sort of trained more from an evolutionary standpoint, I said, to be more pessimistic. So our ancestors, long time ago, where they're getting away from their predators, who at that time might have been like a saber-toothed tiger. And they had to really imagine the worst case scenario, and then that they could prepare in order to survive. And so they passed that trait on and on. What we know about today's modern world is we still have predators. They look different than saber-toothed tigers, and that's a whole nother topic of who our predators are. But what we do know in the modern world is constantly and chronically imagining the worst case scenario does not help us survive, and it certainly does not help us thrive. Our world has shifted, and so I like to think of optimism as a muscle. And it may not be what we naturally tend to go towards, but it is something that is deeply significant, not just when we think about it from an emotional standpoint. I think it makes a lot of sense. You know, optimistic people score much higher in many different studies from an emotional standpoint. But I think what surprises people is actually from a physical and biological standpoint as well. So people that score higher on optimism scales, they are sick less often. They bounce back from respiratory illness more often. They have better heart health, so less cardiovascular issues. They, have better relationships and social relationships, which we now know. There's a huge study, the largest longitudinal study done at Harvard, on happiness, which helped us see that the single most protective factor for happiness later in life is the quality of your relationships. And so we're social creatures. And so optimism touches on that. Optimism also, we've seen people that hold that mindset more, also they're from a cellular level, like age slower. So it really has this amazing impact, both biologically and emotionally. And I think where we kind of get it wrong is we have the wrong definition. I think most of us walking around the world of what optimism really is. And, I think most people think optimism is blind positivity.
Right,
and
or
it's
toxic positivity.
Toxic positivity.
Yeah.
Or just this idea that, everything's great, everything's blissful, there's no room or space for anything else. And that, rose-colored glasses, water glass half full all the time. And really what we know, and I think a lot of people, when I interview people and I ask them, I think a lot of people have this idea that someone that's optimistic is, again, experiencing 24/7 bliss, and even further, maybe someone that is devoid of reality. And I know we've heard that a lot. Mind in the clouds, totally devoid. I don't want to. Yes, I don't want to be an optimist. I want to be a realist. And what I'm here to talk about is that the science of optimism and the real definition is actually like it has reality in it, and I call it real optimism, and that's sort of my practice. An optimist is truly someone who is keenly and mindfully aware of the roadblocks and the setbacks and the less than ideal situations that happen in all of our lives. None of us are immune to struggle. I think we can all sort of agree upon that today in this world, no matter what it is that either we're going through personally or seeing our neighbors go through. But the caveat is people that sort of tend to lean towards optimism, they see these setbacks as something that are temporary, and they have the ability to overcome, even if they don't know how or when, but they just know based on their own historical resilience, because we've all been through our hardest days, and we're here standing, whatever they may be. And so it's really much more linked, instead of to positivity, optimism and real optimism is much more linked to resiliency. And I also like to throw in curiosity. So even if we don't really know where we're going or how something will change, we can be curious about it. We can sit in our authentic feeling and feel really, truly how we feel, which many times is, I don't know if I can say this, but shitty. Like we can experience grief and loss and anger and, all of the emotions, the full range of human emotions, including joy and elation and all of them, excitement. But whatever it is, we're rooted in our authentic emotion right now. We're not swiping it underneath the rug, but we leave a little space. We leave a space open for either hope or for curiosity of how this might change.
Yeah, that's a great tactic, actually, and I know we'll cover some more.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going, because you talked just a couple minutes earlier about how the brain anticipates what might happen, and that's how it works. So how do you, when you're talking about building this muscle or sharpening this skill set, how do you train your mind to anticipate the optimist?
Yes. So that is literally why I created the Things Are Looking Up deck of cards, which came before the book. And honestly, it's interesting because I think most people in my field the book would have come first. But the card deck kind of just came because I would do a lot of speaking and I loved seeing clients and I was sort of practicing this different way of, I don't call it therapy, I call it self-worth work. But and I wanted to give people the tools without having to like get on a wait list to see me or like to have to come to a talk, and what could I give them afterwards. And so it really came organically from people asking for tools. And I thought it was a great way, a nice analog way to kind of just pick up something and flip. I'm really big into the science of rituals. And so cards are something you can really ritualize. And so that to me is a no-brainer. But you know, the one of the best ways, so there's 52 different ways and prompts in the deck of cards that actually help people create a more optimistic mindset from a science-based perspective. And what I love about them are they're not affirmations. So they're actual actionable prompts. And I also have after the last chapter in the book, there's a 33-day challenge. And so it'll take you through some of the stuff that's in the card deck, but some new stuff too. And it'll just take you through 33 days of doing something, an actionable thing to do.
Is that the habit time frame? Because someone just asked me to do something for 33 days.
No, actually. So I'm so happy you brought that up. Well, I was going to say that one of the best ways to increase the optimistic mindset is through the practice of visualization. And we can talk about that. But I'm glad you brought that up too, because so we have all been fed. I'm a little bit of a myth buster. There's so much out there that is great. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just not rooted in science.
Well, you
and
like
one
data.
Of those things. I do. I like data.
According to
I do like data. I always have, even since I was a kid. And I could never just like accept something for face value. I always wanted to know why. I was the annoying kid that was like, but why? But why? By the way, I have 3 kids now who all ask why too. So it has come back.
Yeah.
But I was going to say that that the habit formation, I just think that's and I talk about it in the book. I forget what chapter it's in, but people have for the longest time been saying this thing, and there's tons of book. If you go to the self-help section of a bookstore that just says 21 days to blah, 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 21 days to blah, 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 21 days. And I just thought that was so interesting because there's literally no science to show that it takes 21 days to do any sort of habit formation. It actually, so I was really curious where this came from. And I talk about it in the book, but it came from this like plastic surgeon who was like interested in psychology, but it took his patients 21 days to recover through something. And then when he got into like more psych related stuff, he started utilizing this idea of 21 days to blah, blah, blah. And obviously we all love things that stick and sticky things in our mind. And 21 sounds so great because it's less than a month. And why not? Anyone can do something. Come
People
on,
can
21
start
days.
drinking alcohol 21
Right. And I will say there's nothing wrong with that because there's nothing wrong with you doing something for 21 days. But unfortunately, the science doesn't really agree upon what that number is. I've seen numbers like in the 300s. I've seen 66 days, and that's what the average is 66 days.
Wow.
And so the reason that, and no one's really like come up with like, this is exactly what it is. So sorry about that. But the reason
it's
it's
not 300.
the reason that it's
Let's stick with 21.
33 for me, and I say it, is because, again, we like something we can commit to, and I'm not opposed to the sticky thing, but there's no science behind the 33. I just feel that everything I've seen is around 66, and that first half is always the hardest.
Okay.
And so for me, it was 33. I love the number 3. There's just so many things about that. And I feel like it's a way of, it's longer than a month. So listen, it takes longer than a month. And so if you've already gone through something 33 days, I bet you're more likely to just carry on through it for another 33 days.
You're used to it.
Yeah, because it does become something that you are used to, and it's not short enough that there's nothing. 21 days is too short. So if you do 21 days, that's great. There's better than nothing, but keep going.
What are your clients hurting about? What do most of the people that you talk to and interact with, and again, pay for your services, what are they struggling with and challenged by?
Well, I think that, it depends whether I'm going in and doing a workshop for, a larger corporation, or if I'm working with a couple, or if I'm working with parents or whatever it is. I think the sort of common denominator is it's really hard being a human right now. And I feel that. I'm a mom of 3 young kids. Between technology and it moving so fast, I'm talking a lot about AI with sort of my more corporate clients. And I think and then with parents, it's just like you turn on technology in general with kids, but also you just like open up your phone the minute you wake up or whatever it is. And the news that's out there, the divide, the polarization, the rage people are feeling, the disconnect. And I think what sort of the injustice, like all of it, there's just so much, and we are privy to so much more all over. And our brains, the way they are, were not meant to hold this much information. And the one thing I do want to say is we want to grow. We want change. That's why we're talking about this. We want mindset shifts. We want this.
Yeah.
And what I will say is the brain prioritizes, this is like a big one, the brain prioritizes safety over growth. And so the best thing that we can do first before we expect ourselves to grow is to make sure we're safe. And that means like checking in on our nervous system and trying to, put forth rituals in our lives that are helping us not be in fight or flight. There's very little we can do from that place besides like survive.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
How do you get out of a funk? You have all these tools and you're a human being.
Yeah.
How have you trained your mind to get to that optimistic place?
So I will first say that I am known as the Optimism Doctor, and I really do feel it's my calling, and I can confidently say I feel really good about the work I do, but I also can confidently say I am not the most optimistic person naturally. And I would say in my like small microcosm of like family, my parents, my little microcosm, I'm probably the least optimistic person naturally. And so a lot of it is the work and the tools that I have to go through. They don't come so easily for me. And I think it's important to state that I actually don't think anyone is an optimist or a pessimist. Optimism runs on a continuum. And many of us are more naturally prone to be optimistic in certain areas of our lives and really hindered in being optimistic in other areas of our lives. And so one of the things that I really love doing is helping people understand where they are more naturally optimistic and where they're really struggling. And it will continuously come up, especially in these big moments in life when you are overstressed or burnt out or overworked or like even just being a parent. I work with a lot of parents, and myself included. I feel like some people have this idea that having a child is going to solve something, but really all something like that does, and many other big moments in our lives, is it magnifies or puts a mirror up to the struggles that we already are having. And so it also is a perfect opportunity to kind of see loudly and clearly the knocking that's been going on for a long time of like what we really need to work on. And for me, my Achilles heel, I'd say, of optimism is probably like health. I am naturally optimistic and can sort of be in a calm and leading into hopeful sort of realm in many aspects of lives. But when it comes to health, I am like, my anxiety spikes when it comes to anything. Like I can go down and I can use really pessimistic thought and language when it comes to like a doctor's appointment, getting some news. Like I will go from 0 to 100, and that is like my work. And I have been challenged in that. I mean, imagine going through the pandemic with me, my husband, and my very young kid, and we were expecting our next one during that time. But, in reality, that's where optimism is born, is through our struggles. And, I thought that was really tough. And then, we had something as a family that was even tougher that came our way. And we had to deal with a illness that came out of nowhere for our small 2.5-year-old. And like, that was definitely the hardest, and it still is the hardest. And so I think what people sort of don't understand is they think optimism is like grown and born out of the moments where you're feeling like joy and alignment and happiness. But actually, it's when you persevere through struggle is where your optimism is grown from. And so without struggle, there really wouldn't be that optimism, because there wouldn't be that resiliency. And so someone was asking me the other day, like, what is your mantra? And honestly, my mantra used to be things are looking up. And that's why I named the brand that. My mantra is now I can do hard things. And it feels so much more real to me. And I've been through some really hard things, which I did not have any trust in myself that I thought I could get through. And I know I can. And I also know that hard things will come again.
Yeah.
But I know I'll get through them.
You build.
Yeah, you build.
Yeah.
You build.
Well, and you get confidence from overcoming them, right?
You
So it
do. And
tells
I
your
think
brain,
like another thing
everything
when I work with people is it's so simple. Another tool sort of that's really important and imperative to optimism. And we hear it all the time, but we do not do it. It is giving yourself and giving others permission to celebrate wins. Celebrating these small wins. I have something that I have my clients go through, and I talk about it in the book, but I'm really big on this idea, and it's like a fun thing, but I have people do a to-do list instead of a to-do list.
Oh,
That's cool.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I don't want you making a to-do list at the end of the day. I'm happy with you doing that in the start of your day, but I don't want you going to sleep with your to-do list. I want you to go to sleep with 3 to 5 things that you actually accomplished or did. And they should be small even, because did you drink the amount of water you wanted to drink today? Ta-da.
Ta-da.
Did you get
That's
out
so
of
much more
bed?
fun.
Ta-da. Did you feed your kids? Ta-da. I know. And it also puts a smile on your face,
It
which is
does.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, before we go to the show and tell, I'm really excited to look at these cards. I love cards. I pull cards every morning, so I could always use more cards of things. You've had some career shifts. I read that you were in finance. You also had some time at a punk label. Yeah. And then you got like 17 degrees from prestigious universities. So
I know.
we were
My
parents
like, okay, no more degree. We can't. We were talking about, and you were like, okay, we're done with the degrees. We know there's
because Katy's like, but also I'm like, no.
So I was at UCLA yesterday, and I was like,
no. What's next? Your next mantra, just say no. But what are some of those shifts? Tell us about those moments of just changing your career and finding your calling. You said that optimism is something that you're leaning into.
I think my parents would say until I went back to school and I was almost done with my doctorate, all the way up until then. So I had a couple different careers. I graduated undergrad a little bit early, and I was one of those people that just which is funny for me to say now because all I want to do is go to school all the time right now. I am I love learning, and if I could go back to a classroom, I would in a heart. I'm trying. But, I wanted so badly to just be done with school, and I wanted to work. I was one of those kids in college that just couldn't wait to get a job. And so I started working a little bit early, and my parents would definitely say that it was less of, I could put a positive spin on it. And for me, I think it is and that's also optimism. I can shift it to how I think it makes sense for me. And now in retrospect, it does make sense. But they always were you can't finish anything you start. So that was something that was on me, that I know it came from a good intention. Yeah. My parents are my biggest, I now know as an adult and having kids, not everybody is fortunate enough to have, supportive and loving and encouraging parents who, frankly, even though they didn't know it, by them just being who they were is why I was interested in this space to begin with, because they are optimists and they came to this country with nothing and they created so much, and they didn't skip the part that was the hard work. And I think that's the part where we, growing up are always told in my generation, what we were told was you can do whatever it is that you're passionate about. Make sure do whatever it is that your heart desires, you can do. And or the generation after, or at least maybe not the whole generation, but we're really in that space of just think about it and manifest it and it will fall into your lap. And so there's this whole missing piece where it's what about all the hard work? What about the blood, sweat, and tears? What about this? Yeah, what about exactly? And so my parents, they didn't shy away from showing us that. I mean, I saw all of it, and I saw the hope and the dream and the visualization and the somewhat you have to have in order to change something, because change is the hardest state of being for any human being. We all share that in common. Change is hard for all of us. We don't like it. But in order to actually make change, because it's so hard to do and it's such a difficult sort of neuro pathway, you have to know number one, why. Of course, you have to really know why you want this change. But besides that, you have to understand and really know, eat, breathe, and sleep why your life would be so much better with this change than what it currently is today. And so, because you have to go through a lot to make the change, and it's not easy. Sometimes changes are easy, but they're not always easy. Most of the time, they're difficult. And so I think I had a lot of that swirling in me where I felt like I deserved to be doing what I was passionate about. But at the very same time, I came from a family that showed a lot of grit. And my, dad, is really passionate about what he did, but it wasn't easy. And I know he had a lot of, hiccups along the way, and no one handed him anything. And he did a lot of stuff within that dream of doing what he was doing that wasn't fun for him, wasn't all fun. So I had that too. But I think I struggled with but I should do what I'm passionate about. And at the time, as a teen, I loved singing. In my mind, I was going to be a singer. I was going to be, a sort of pop, at the time that I thought I was going to be a singer, it was like Avril Lavigne and more of I loved grunge music
grunge
growing up. I was big 90s grunge girl. I still only listen to a lot of that. So anyway, I thought that's what I was going to be doing. They very kindly
They were like,
encouraged,
great idea.
Great idea. You are talented. We love it for you, but you're going to college too. And so, my first year of college, I had a demo, and I was doing all this. I was recording, and I was at UCLA, and the producer I worked with was like, well, you got to take some time off, and you got to perform, and you got to do this. And I sort of had my parents in the back of my head. And even though I wanted it, I also, in the end of the day, was pretty aversive to risk taking.
Yeah.
I have a rebellious side in me, but it's so funny. I tell this story all the time. When I was a teenager, I would sneak out of the house sometimes, but the only place I could get to was my car in my driveway. I couldn't meet friends in my car or on my driveway. I couldn't leave the premises, but I could leave the door.
That's
risky. That was risky. That's as far as my risk was going to go.
Yeah.
Still snuck out. I mean, they didn't know. Now they do. But I was on property.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, I had that all in me, and I had a lot of interest. And so I didn't want to pigeonhole myself. And I was excited to be at a university with tons of people and classes. And UCLA, I was talking to my mentor about this yesterday at UCLA, actually, and I was just saying what a great opportunity it was. It breeds such amazing talent in the form of professors, and they offer so much timely class. When I started school, it was right after 9/11, and there was a lot of talk of biowarfare, and anthrax that whole thing was happening, and they very quickly made a whole class on it. And at the same time, I took a class on the history of the Beatles, which was really up my alley too. So I just was again, I'm a learner. I wanted so much. And so I didn't want to pigeonhole myself into anything, which then kind of, again, to my parents were well, now you have just such a generic degree. What are you going to do with it? I in undergrad, I studied sociology. What can you do with sociology? And it was just the study of society and peoples, which really turned me on. But it was true. I don't know what I was going to do with it. But I had all these other interests, and I ended up working. I was I'm going to be in the music business. And I did that for a little bit. It was more of an internship. It was through college. I got credit for it a little bit after.
Here in LA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it was so fun. Probably the best couple of years of my life. I did have streaks of red, very bright red in my hair. Again, that was as risky as I got, but it felt very risky for me. It was really good. And I also loved business, and I loved people. And so I kind of got into banking on the capital market side, and I think I was good at it, but it wasn't it was dragging me because I clearly had no passion in it, and the humanity piece of it was missing. And I went into public health then, and at a company, and I had an amazing supervisor, I had an amazing boss who was basically just when we are at these meetings and we bring in an organizational psychologist, and even in the deal making strategy we do, it's very human. It's very people oriented. You just light up. Have you ever thought about? He was thinking organizational psychology and psychology of business, and it just lit up something in me. And I was already a few years out of undergrad, but I went back with his like support and encouragement. I knocked on like every door of, I asked, anyone to let me volunteer at a research, lab or, in clinical work. And I went back and got my prereqs to go and apply for psych school. And then once I started that, my parents were like, mainly my dad, he was like, you want to do a doctorate? That's a long process. You're not going to finish it. And I think it was sort of like, yeah. He didn't mean it, but it was sort of, and I love you, and are you sure? And it was slightly, that is the kind of like rebellion or challenge that I feel like he knows how to light fire underneath me. And at the same time, it happened to be everything I was passionate about. I never thought about psychology because I am a very emotional and sensitive and empathic person. I mean, I talked about this in the book, but when the Titanic came out, I did not go to school for 2 weeks.
That was a rough one.
It was a really rough one. So I'm like, what business do I have in psychology? Like listening to people's deepest, darkest, most traumatic experiences and being able to be across from them and not crumbling and absolutely losing myself. But what I found out was the empathy that was there so naturally really helped me. And as an older sort of now adult and with great supervision, and I think that I'm so grateful, even though I don't practice clinically anymore, I'm still grateful for my foundation in the clinical world. And I learned how to hone that in and how to boundary that and how to like ritualize. I had my own rituals of turning off like the energy before I walked into my home to like then, because I can get really like into a TV show or into like really into people's like lives when they're telling me their stories. But I will say the common thread to all of it is I just had really good mentorship. I was lucky, really good mentor throughout the whole thing.
But you did it naturally and you did it your own way.
Yeah,
and
I followed my curiosity.
You followed your curiosity. You had, you were impacted by your parents and you came to what you're calling now as
I didn't shy away from the hard work because I think that's important.
That's what I was going to say. The hard work and the calling.
And because I talk a lot about purpose right now. It's probably one of the biggest things I talk about. But I want to make it clear we can't always be paid for what our purpose is. That is a luxury. And it's amazing when it happens. Like, I truly love what I do so much and I feel lucky. But sometimes we have to do things because they're an obligation or because we have to get food on the table for our kids or we have to, we don't all get to do that. And we can have a side hustle or we should have hobbies and be able to do that. But I want to make that clear. That's a privilege. Not all of us have the privilege to be always doing exactly what we are, most passionate about and be paid for it and, feel bliss about it all the time. Like we also are up for the task of hard work.
Well, and also if we do get to do that, it's not always forever.
It isn't always forever.
You might be able to get it to do it for a certain amount of time.
Yep.
Right. And it's just kind of.
Oh, totally.
So then, and you have gratitude for that.
Yes, you do.
That experience. Wow. Dr. Chopra, such a privilege to connect with you today.
Thank you so much.
Where can people get this book?
Literally every single place you buy books.
Oh, right.
Okay. Amazon, Barnes & Noble,
great
books, all the bookstores, everywhere you can buy books. Your independent bookstores in your neighborhood, ask for it. It should be there, but ask for it. The message here is real optimism, tools for real people living real lives. So this is not a bunch of platitudes, and it's not, hopefully, I don't think it is, like every other sort of self-help book. There's a lot of great self-help books out there, but it really is rooted in science. It's a blend of real science and storytelling and client stories and personal memoir. And it is just a guide on how to get you through. I always like to say optimism is not about denying the dark. It's helping you. This book is helping you see in it because we're all in the dark at some points.
Wow.
Powerful stuff.
It is powerful stuff. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
blessing us with your optimism.
Yes, and for everyone watching and listening, thank you for tuning in. We wish you an optimistic rest of your day and journey.
Don't forget to subscribe, and we want to hear from you. In the comments, tell us what you were moved by when you heard Dr. Chopra today, what you were moved by, what shifted in you, and how are you excited to move forward.
Yes, and until we see you again, keep making real shift happen.